Attention Big Blue Nation. Welcome to Kentucky Basketball Then and Now, a unique exploration of America's paramount collegiate hardwood program, featuring anecdotes and memories from the 1950s forward to the very latest on everything UK hoops. Kentucky Basketball Then and Now seats Wildcat fans front court and center. Here's Lexington native and SEC standout Gary Waddell and Owensboro native and Rupp Front senior student manager Mike Harreld.
Hello and welcome again to Kentucky Basketball Then and Now. Again, I'm Gary Waddell. I've got my co-host Mike Harreld with me, and we also have Tom Gray, who's almost become a regular. Tom is with stats, and just like we're going to talk today, these transfers we'll talk about all are from Tom. He's provided some very valuable information that we can talk about. And I'll repeat again, our email address for anybody that wants to interact with us is chatwildcats@gmail.com. Chat singular with Wildcats plural at gmail.com. Well, guys, we have, after yesterday, for a change, we've got some good news with our big center coming back. There was talk that he would come back, and I mean, that's nothing but a positive the way I see it, and I think everybody would agree. 7-1 and showed signs of becoming a good player in time. And somebody said Cal may be worried that Bruce Pearl would pick him up and he would beat UK down in Auburn one game, which would be very embarrassing, which I doubt if Cal went that far and thinking it through. But Cal didn't want him to leave. There's no question about that. But anyway, he's a good guy to have back without question, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good pickup. When I think of Nigeria, I think of Hakeem Olajuwon,
yep,
who I think was also a Nigerian. I read up on Onyenso last night when I heard he was coming back. He actually, as a freshman in high school, played on the Nigerian national basketball team, which is pretty impressive.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it's not the United States or some other big country, but still, he was playing in the European National Basketball Championships as a freshman in high school. Pretty impressive.
Well, that is great. Duke lost a good player committal this week with, and you have to help me if you know to pronounce his name, but he is
Double M.
Yeah, okay. He has decided to look around, and I think is definitely going to leave. I think he changed his mind when the big center decided to come back yesterday, or center forward, and I think he got nervous about playing time, and but whatever, he's not coming back. But Duke, between the guys that said they're coming back from last year's team, plus recruits, are going to have 8 5-stars on their team next year, which is impressive. I mean, that goes back to 2005 with the Palooning, not polluting, but the team that we had, where the platoon system that Cal we had back in 05, where it had a A team, B team without much difference between the two. But,
yeah, that was 2015, but I know what you mean.
What did I say, 5? Yeah, 15, yeah.
Definitely.
You know, I'm to the point where I'm not, up until a year ago, 2 years ago, if Duke got somebody good, I thought, that's terrible for us. And if North Carolina got one, but now I'm just worried about St. Peter's and Kansas State, who they're recruiting. It's a little more realistic. I don't want to lose any sleep over what Duke's getting because we haven't been going that far now. And, of course, Duke didn't go far last year, but they sure did the year before to the championship game. So, but it's this transfer or free agency, as some people call it, it's something else. What, 1,500 players are in free agency now, I think it is?
I checked that this morning. Something like it's more than 1,000 and it's pushing 1,500 if it's not over.
Yeah.
If you had that option, Gary, back in your day, where might you have gone if you weren't happy after a year at Florida?
Well, if they still wanted me as they did out of high school, I would have gone to Tennessee.
Ah, okay.
And I think my dad, the second time around, would have forced that. He wanted me to go initially, and as my mother said, that's the closest they came to getting divorced in me selecting a school. They always said, once they knew I was going to get a scholarship and coaches started calling stuff, it's my decision. I got to live with it. Well, it came toward the end. My dad didn't quite agree with that. And he loved Ray Mears. A lot of people don't, but my dad really thought a lot of Ray Mears. And so anyway, that's where, and it's funny how things work out. I knew I wanted to get out and run. They were slow down. But turns out running didn't suit me. I should have gone to a slower down type of school, and Tennessee did that. And they developed a guy named Tom Borwinkle, I think all three of us remember, who was nothing at Millersburg Institute, about, 35 miles from Lexington. Nobody recruited him but Mears, and I don't even think he could run when he first got him. He redshirted him and made him lose weight, and then the mouse of the field house, as UK coaches called him, Stu Aberdeen, started working with him, and turns out he had a long, long year with the Chicago Bulls. So you can be developed. And
I watched that happen. That was one of the best things Mears ever did as a coach.
Yep. That was. I think Aberdeen gets a lot of the credit there. UK coaches, I think, had some pet names for all the Tennessee coaches. That was closest to a fierce rivalry that I can remember between UK and another school. And what they said about Mears was not particularly attractive because of some of his mental issues and so forth. And you probably heard him, Mike. But anyway, getting on to other subjects. Guys, you want to go through this list a little bit, and let's talk about who is the best player that our four coaches in recent history recruited?
As a transfer.
As a transfer.
Well, I'll start first.
Okay.
Joe Hall, Adolph Rupp only took him when he missed on the recruiting. And in the mid-50s, late 50s, maybe into the early 60s, UK missed a few on the high school recruiting. They started taking junior college players, and two of them were his most successful transfers. Bob Burrow in the mid-1950s, and then Adrian Smith in the late 1950s.
Yeah.
Adrian probably wasn't quite as successful at UK as he was in the pros, but he was part of the Fiddlin' Five, and he won an NCAA championship. So I would say those two, and then Shelby Linville in the late 40s is another one. So selectively, Rupp would take a player as a transfer and get something good out of him. Joe Hall wins as far as the best transfer ever. That would be Kyle Macy, I think. I don't know if there'd be much quibble with that.
Nope. Totally agree.
That's right.
Totally agreed.
Eddie Sutton really didn't take many. Billy Gillespie didn't have much luck with him. Pitino, like a lot of other things, Pitino probably had the best success. He only took 8, but at least 6 of them were very successful.
Oh, yeah. I think all of them basically were very important to the program. And Adolph took 21 transfers in 42 years. My old Lafayette math tells me that's on average one every 2 years. So he didn't take them. But Pitino took, how many is it here? He took a number of them again. Of course, he came in with
8 in 8 years.
Yeah, he came in with the cupboard was kind of bare other than the 4 unforgettables. And he built it up with some very good ones. All the way, any ones that weren't highly recruited, like Dale Brown, made them good players. Dale started the game against Duke that we remember so fondly. Well, not fondly, we remember, and started a number of games. And I doubt if he had to out-recruit too many colleges to get Dale Brown to go there. But he was Elam, Mark Pope, Todd Swoboda even helped some from Northern Kentucky. Dale Brown, again, I mentioned. Travis Ford was a great pickup from Missouri. Kentucky boy that got out of Kentucky and was a good pickup. So he did very well. Another one that you don't hear about as much, but Hashimo Evans was very crucial to Tubby's championship.
He definitely was.
Yeah, Rick recruited him, but Tubby inherited him, and an excellent player. And again, Mark Pope. Well, I think without question, the best that Pitino got was a guy from Louisville by the name of Derek Anderson.
Yeah, I would put him at the top of the list.
I would too. Yes, I would too.
He was very lightly recruited by Pitino, as a matter of fact, in 1992. Pitino had his eyes on guys like Roderick Rhodes and other fellows that year.
Yep.
And he really barely gave him the time of day. So he was, when Derek chose out of high school, it was between Louisville and Ohio State. Now, why he picked Ohio State, I'm not real sure, but they were really popular as a recruiting choice back then. And why he went to Ohio State, I don't know. It might have been a little bit of the Gary Waddell going to Florida instead of Tennessee thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. Maybe family wanted him to go to Louisville. He wanted to get away and see something different. I don't know.
Yeah.
But UK barely gave him the time of day, and he was a good player.
Oh yeah,
coming out of
sure
high
he
school.
was.
We were lucky to get him back.
He was great in the press for Rick. He was 6'4" and quick, and that's why he played for San Antonio and maybe another team or two in the pros for many years. He was very good, and
one of the few that suited the college game and the pro game really well.
Yeah, grew up in the projects of Louisville, and and had he not hurt his leg, we would have had 3 in a row championships. I don't think. We lost to Arizona in overtime. That certainly he would have made a much more than a 2-point difference or 1 point in regulation to win that game. And actually, I think most people thought he was healthy, but for some reason, Rick just didn't want to play him. And Rick had said all week in practice, he was our best player on the floor today. And then come Saturday in the semis, he doesn't play. So whatever. That was a head scratcher, I think. And Derek wanted to play. I've talked to him. He was ready to go.
I have firsthand experience with that too. My stepdaughter was a WNBA All-Star in 1999, the first year they had one. And Derek had a girlfriend who was also an All-Star. And I rode the bus with him from the hotel to the Madison Square Garden. And I point blank asked him, Derek, could you have played that game? He said, I could have, but coach didn't want to jeopardize, didn't want to have it on him that he had done something which jeopardized my future. He said, I could have played.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not 100%, but I was definitely good enough to play.
Well,
and,
you can't.
Coach was looking out for his interests.
Yeah. I mean, you can't argue with Rick on that one. I wish he would have played, but our coaches, and I guess I hear that most often with Cal, because Cal's so mysterious with these injuries. This year he had a couple times where he's just out for a week or so, nothing major. I think the first one was with severe wheeler. He was out a month or so. And Cal needs to be a little more open with injuries or not say anything at all. I think the fans got really tired of him basically not being totally truthful on when will these guys be back and playing. Same thing with Oscar. Called it a minor surgery when Oscar was out 3 weeks and wasn't back in good shape even when he got back. So,
yeah, I don't know how much of that he's talking to the media and how much he just doesn't know. But you're right. He confuses people. It'd be better not to say anything than to.
Well, you're right. And he doesn't help himself, guys, when the press in the press conference will say, how's so-and-so? And he said, well, I haven't talked to him today. I mean, come on now. You don't talk to one of your starters. That's kind of, and that's not true, but he could use some PR in that. He's a great PR person in general and salesman, but some things he could need a little bit of public relations help on, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
we're talking about transfers to UK. Another thing to consider is transfers away from UK that had a big impact. 2 to come to mind for me are one from our era, Don Rolfus, in the early 60s, went back home to Cincinnati, and it turns out he was getting married. He and his wife were having a baby, and that was the reason for the transfer more than anything else. But he had a very successful 2 years at Cincinnati, and he had been very helpful getting through some of that transition from Cotton Nash to the Runs. Yep. He was quite a good player. He held his own against Texas Western. Bearcats lost by 2, but Rolfus had a good game against Neville Shedd and those kind of guys.
Mike, you're in the middle of Don Rolfus, weren't you?
Yeah, he was there when I was there, and he was. This is my description. I don't know if anybody's ever else done it, but he was kind of a head case. He had a hard time getting ready to play. One game, Coach Lancaster really pumped him up before the game, and it worked. And he came out and scored. I don't remember how many, but well over 20. He was a very capable player, but you just never knew from day to day what you were going to get out of him. He never seemed to be happy to me at UK. So it was unfortunate because he was a terrific player.
Well,
he definitely missed his girlfriend. That's for sure. From what I've read and heard about it, it was personal thing more than UK versus Cincinnati as a place to play basketball. He wanted to be back home near his girlfriend.
My gosh,
And
he's only an hour away. That's
I know.
yeah.
It is. The other one that came to mind was Chuck Alexinas.
Yeah.
Chuck Alexinas came in, played on the 1978 championship team sparingly, but he played, and he was going to take the place of Roby and Phillips, and he did for a year, and then he left and went to Connecticut. I'm not sure why.
Well, he's from there. I think he was from Connecticut, but
he was, but I'm not sure why he left UK.
Yeah,
because he still comes back for all the celebrations.
Oh, is that
so
right?
He must have enjoyed it. He could have been one heck of a player at UK and maybe been a 20-point scorer.
Mm-hmm.
That hurt the Wildcats in the late 70s, early 80s, and not having him on the team.
Seems like in the 60s, and maybe it's true for every college, Kentucky lost a lot of guys because of grades.
Yes.
And maybe having a little alcohol in their room or in their little refrigerator in the room. And Mike, is there any truth to something I'd always heard? If UK had a guy they really wanted to get rid of, that they would plant a beer in his refrigerator, and then when he did the nightly checks, they would look and say, "Oh, what's this? Beer. I think Coach Rupp won't like this. You may be gone." And had you ever heard that, Mike?
No, I have not. It wouldn't totally surprise me, but I never heard of that happening, although they didn't hesitate to encourage people strongly to leave that were not, obviously they'd made a mistake on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, things are just so different today. Like we're talking about these transfers, and Coach Rupp had one every two years. Well, now, teams have some of them three or four every year, and the rules are so much more lenient. It's just really hard to compare the times. It's amazingly different. The really good coaches, I think, if Coach Rupp had been able to stay around, he would have adapted to whatever was going on, because he was constantly on top of what was changing and what he could do to take an advantage of it. But I think a lot of people would have had a harder time changing.
Yeah. I'm sure Adolph could buy players with the best of them if he had that opportunity. And some people said he did have that opportunity, but what do I know? But
well, he may have, but not with the number of zeros that NIL players are getting behind the number.
No, we didn't have that kind of money. But I never saw anything happening like that. But there was a lot of talk of $100 handshakes and that kind of stuff, and there was about 20 or 30, something like that, people on the list that I was given to. Actually, I just learned it as a freshman, but that were allowed into practice, and that was a very magnanimous thing at the time. Coach Rupp didn't want anybody in practice, but I remember him explaining to me. He said, "Slim, these people we let into practice, and because they can do things that I cannot." So I think he meant in some cases they took care of situations that needed to be taken care of financially or otherwise.
Yeah.
But the rules were so severe that if you were playing on a varsity team at a school and your parent died, the school couldn't get you home and back. You had to do that yourself. There was there was this very tight thing of what is a scholarship, and that was it. And there was no exceptions whatsoever. And so obviously if you had some poor young man without very much money and he needed to get home because his mother was sick, somebody had to get him home. But it was illegal under the rules for the university to do it. So I think what was going on behind the scenes, these folks that really supported the team and had the money were making that kind of stuff happen. And I don't blame them. I mean, the rules were a bit severe.
Yeah, it's funny. Delta could give them a discount on a grievance deal if someone could prove it. Maybe that's still the case today, but yet the school couldn't get him home by flying. So that was a little strict. And, they're always and also, I think, Mike, they let people in the locker room after a game, after a win also, because after, I guess, Adolph talked to the players, I think it was filled with gentlemen with suits.
And, it was people that, the same people, basically. Because I wasn't supposed to let anybody else in the locker room that wasn't allowed into practice.
Yeah. You didn't let me in. I was on the outside Mr. Wildcat's door, and I never got in there. Yeah. Mike?
He was, Coach Rupp was very, very clear on that. And we when we went to the Final Four, we had, I can't remember the commentator's name now, who was a national sports broadcaster, and he wanted in the locker room, and I told him that he wasn't authorized. The only people that were allowed in were the news people that had traveled with us the entire year. So he went to Kenny Kuhn, who was the PR guy. And Mr. Kuhn came to me, and I said, Kenny, you know the deal. Coach Rupp has told me he can get in here and who cannot. And I'm not interested in getting my behind chewed out. And so if you want him in here, you need to get Coach Rupp to say okay. And I don't think, my impression was Mr. Kuhn and Coach Rupp were that close. And so he didn't get in there. And, this was one of those really top announcers at the time. I've forgotten their name, and I'm sure today they would let them in. But back then, Coach Rupp was very, very strict about who got into practice and locker rooms and that kind of stuff.
Kenny Kuhn's a name I haven't heard in 40 years. I think he preceded Russell Rice, who was a really good guy.
Yes.
And I went to high school with one of Russell's daughters, and he was a super guy. That became, he's written a couple books about UK basketball.
Gary, you talked about UK losing players to grades. A couple come to mind are Mickey Gibson from Hazard, one of the Katzenjammer kids with Conley and Cron. And then also Rex Chapman's dad, Wayne, who was Riley and Dampier's running mate on the Kittens in 1963. Those are two doggone good players who could have played a role.
Yeah. Chapman played in the ABA a number of years.
He did, he was on that Western team that was really good in 65 or whenever, in the mid-60s. And he played freshman at UK, but then moved to Western. Yeah. And then Mickey Gibson, I think, played as a sophomore at UK, but then grades got the better of him, but he went somewhere else.
Left-hander.
Both those were really good players.
Yeah, there were some other stories. Gibson didn't really apply himself academically and sometime athletically. I mean, he just wasn't a focused individual. But boy, when he was on and focused, he was incredibly good. But he was kind of his own worst enemy. And then on Wayne Chapman, he was a very good player. He played for Davis County High he was, I guess, about the same year I was, or 1 year behind me. And he came to UK, and his parents, especially his mother, was what you would call a helicopter parent today. She was right on top of things, and so she would come to the freshman games. Then he couldn't play varsity, and so when you'd start the game, there was maybe the freshman game. There was maybe 50 people in Memorial Coliseum, and Wayne was one of those guys that were typical coming out of high school that were really superstars scoring. He had never bothered to play any defense. And so the other team would come in and they would basically, I don't know if I guess they figured it out, but they'd go right at him. And so he was just getting torn up on his defense, and Coach Lancaster would just go crazy. And he would jump up and scream things like, "Chapman, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to run your ass out of here." And empty Memorial Coliseum and him screaming, it is literally reverberating around the stadium. And I always thought that I don't know this for a fact, but I've always thought that had a lot to do with Wayne being, he was smart enough to make his grades, but he didn't apply himself really as well as he should have. And it was a shame that he didn't stay, because I think had he stayed with us, that the game against Texas Western could have been a lot different, because enough of our stars were hurting a little bit that we needed one more pickup, so to speak.
Yeah.
That may be why Rex grew up as more of a Louisville fan than a UK fan. Probably is, if his dad didn't have a great experience at UK.
It's one of the few that's really surprised me that Rex picked UK. I thought for sure he was going to Louisville, but he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Sutton. Smooth talked him into coming to UK, thank goodness.
Yeah. Maybe some handshakes from boosters, too. You never know.
Perhaps. that was pretty commonplace all the way back.
Yeah.
Remember.
Yeah. I think you're right. Everybody did that to some degree. And probably more for football players in the SEC than basketball players. Well, I'm sure that's the case, other than a couple schools.
This is not an Adolph story, but something I've read about him. He's most famous for winning championships in basketball, but his first ever championship was in 1926 in Iowa. He led his high school. He coached his high school wrestling team to the state championship. Now, that's a big deal in Iowa.
Yeah.
Adolph did not know the first thing about wrestling or coaching it. He went out to the library and checked out a book on wrestling, read up on it, and then coached his boys to the state championship at a school in Iowa, Marshallsburg or something like that. I forget the name, a little town, Fredericksburg, maybe something like that. Marshalltown, that's it.
That doesn't surprise me, because he was, and he went on to have great success. His characteristics and stuff took over in the media, but he was a very focused individual, driven, and that's exactly what he would do. If he didn't know something, he would go study it and really get down to the nitty gritty. And so hearing you say that doesn't surprise me, because he was constantly, even after the years of success he'd had at Kentucky, every practice he was going around talking to people about, how do we do today? What do you think we need to do? I mean, he was just constantly focused and trying to improve and seeking information.
His first few years at UK, in addition to being the head basketball coach, he was also the head track and field coach. I bet there's not many folks other than ones around in the 20s, and I'm not sure they're with us, and that know that. I didn't know it till recently, but
yeah,
he was. I tell you what, if you were a track performer under Coach Rupp, you would be in shape.
Yeah.
He would have driven them very, very strongly. He was a man of, at least I always found him to have great integrity and focus and consistency. Like the whole time I was there, the four years, he came in at the same time, just as the freshman game was starting. I had to have certain things like a program and two sticks of gum and a couple of pieces of chalk and some tissues waiting for him. And I mean, he just had figured out what he needed, when he needed it, what he wanted, and it had better be there. And very, very consistent. But then if he figured out, well, that's not working, then he would change. But, the man in the blue or the brown suit, because he wore a blue suit one of his first games coaching, and he lost. And he supposedly never wore a blue suit again.
Oh. He was superstitious.
So
that's why he looked for hairpins the day of a game. And I think people would plant them just in front of the door for the bus after it arrived and to take him to the Coliseum. And he was, as I understand, very superstitious.
One of the things that I remember, the Vanderbilt game at Vandy my senior year, which, back then, even though both Vandy and UK were very good, only one of us was going to get to go to the NCAA tournament because you had to win your conference. And I think at the time we had beat them in Lexington, but everybody thought they beat us in Nashville. And so we were having our pregame meal that was the standard, the burnt steak and a piece of toast. And, it was supposed to be just the players and the coaches and me, but the restaurant let these 3 or 4 guys, big Kentucky fans, in while we were there. And some of us were trying to get them out, but all of a sudden, Coach Rupp gets up, walks past me, headed toward the door, and he says, "Slim, come on up to the room in a minute." And so I, took care of whatever I had to do, and I get up to his room, and he was coming out of the shower, drying himself off with a towel, and he said, "I just got so nervous down there with those people in there distracting me that I just broke out in a sweat, and I just had to come up here and take a shower." And so we sat there for about 10 minutes talking before it was time to be down there for the Cavs. And he just was in a talkative mood. He talked about every player. And I remember one of the things he said was Steve Clevenger was a really good player, and he wasn't getting to play enough, and he should have redshirted him. And that was probably right. Steve was a really good player.
Playmaker.
Yeah. And, but anyway, he just went through the whole thing. So he would have these kind of moods, but they were always focused on the game and on how we're going to do better.
I remember Clevenger started, and then he got hurt late in the season. And I remember Ray Mears told me, he said, that's really bad for us because Clevenger set everybody else up, where Argento, who replaced him, was more of a shooter. Argento never saw a shot I don't think he didn't like. And so he thought UK wouldn't benefit from that switch there from Clevenger to Phil Argento. The Vanderbilt game, and I don't know why some of these games stick out more than others, but your senior year, that was a game that in one corner was Louis Dampier, the other corner was Pat Riley.
Right.
And Larry Conley would penetrate to about the foul line and then kick it out to one or the other. And I think that's a game that Louis may have got 42 points or something against Vanderbilt. That was a great game because you're right. Vanderbilt was, of course, very good back then, and they had the funky GM.
Clyde Lee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Clyde Lee, just jumping around here, he may have been the best player in the 60s in the SEC. Maybe if you put Maravich in there, he was second, but he didn't like publicity, but he played many years for the Golden State Warriors back in the day. And I remember Lexington, he came up one game and Kentucky didn't have any height, and they had John Adams was the center, who you'll remember, Mike.
Yeah.
And he got 41 against John. I mean, just felt sorry for him. I was up in the upper deck right above it, and at 6'6", he had no chance against 6'11" Clyde Lee.
Yeah, John was a really hard worker. He was a decent athlete. As you say, he was short for the position they had him trying to play, but he was one of the hardest working, finest people I've ever known. It was tough that he just wasn't quite the center that you had to have that year to compete in the SEC.
He went on to get his law degree from UK and eventually became a well-respected judge in Lexington for many years. Nice guy. I didn't know him well, but knew him a little bit. And you're right. He's from a little Well, he's from Rising Sun, if I remember, Rising Sun, Indiana.
Yep. Rising Sun.
It still rings a bell with me, but anyway.
Yeah.
I went to college with a guy who knew him. My college friend is high school 69, and Adams would have been high school 61. But Rising Sun's about as big as my apartment.
Yeah.
It's not a big place, so everybody knows everybody. So
Yeah. Why I remember Rising Sun, I never know. I can't remember where I had lunch.
because of the
yesterday.
song, House of the Rising Sun.
No, it's not that. That was way after he played. Well, 3 or 4 years maybe, but I don't know why, but I remembered. A lot of those Indiana towns I remember because they all produced great basketball players.
They sure did, yeah.
Yeah.
I know one story. You mentioned Ray Mears, and Ray's approach to the game was significantly different than ours. He was a very disciplined, running plays, setting picks, screens, etc. And by our standards, played a slowdown.
Oh yeah.
But it was very effective, and so we would be practicing to get ready to play Tennessee. And of course, the blue team, as Coach Rupp called them, the guys wearing the blue shirts were the opposition. And Brad Bounds, who was a heck of a shooter, but not very quick or fast or anything, was always on the blue team. And when they would run the Tennessee offense, Brad would just kill us because that offense was just made for him. Set about 3 picks and get him open, and then he could shoot. And of course, Coach Rupp's view of the world is the white team was supposed to always beat the blue team. That was just, if that started out, the 5 he thought ought to be on the white team didn't win the scrimmage, he was very upset. And so for about the 3rd day in a row, the blue team won, mainly because of Brad and his shooting in that offense. And Coach Rupp was so frustrated, and I'm sure he made Brad feel very bad when he did this, but he finally was so frustrated, he screamed about 3 cuss words and said, "Bounds, blankety, blankety, blank, you should have gone to Tennessee."
When I think of Brad Bounds, his claim to fame is that he and Louis Dampier graduated high school in 1963 in the state of Indiana.
Bluffton.
And Louis outscored him in points per game, but in total points, Brad Bounds outscored Louis Dampier that year. So he was a pretty highly regarded player. He never did much in college, but maybe he didn't go to right school, like you said, Mike. But he was a heck of a player in high school.
I think he was from Bluffton, Indiana, I believe.
Bluffton, Indiana, near Fort Wayne, yes.
Kentucky got a break during the 60s because Indiana's coach was not that, what's the word, not that good. That's a simple term. But so they didn't really have to compete against Indiana for the Macy's and those type of players. But I think Brad was a character from everything I gather. I didn't know him personally, but I heard some stories about him. He went into coaching at right after either Jessamine County or Woodruff and had a little incident where I think he came in after a game and they played bad and told the players, said, "Boys, I'm going to go out and get drunk, and I suggest you do the same." And immediately was fired.
Oh, goodness.
Some things you just remember.
He went on to quite a successful high school coaching career in Illinois, if I'm thinking the same guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had quite a successful career.
Yeah.
But he never, from what I understand, his nickname was the Bounder. I don't know where I heard that. Is that right, Mike? The Bounder?
Yeah. He was not, he was slow and not quick at all. And of course, to play the Kentucky offense, you needed to be fast and quick.
Now you're talking about Bounds, slow and not me.
Yeah. Well, maybe both, but definitely Brad. I mean, he was a great guy and worked hard, and everybody liked him. In fact, the fans loved him. Yeah. Because
they did.
When they would put him in, if we were 15 ahead and they'd put the subs in, Brad and the crowd's wanting to run up the score. And of course, Coach Rupp's not necessarily very excited about that, but Bounds would always hit about 4 or 5 in a row, and the crowd would just go wild.
I remember that. Yeah, he was a fan favorite. They always pick one when they get off the bench. The fans cheer for, and Brad Calipari was that for 2 or 3 years, I believe, and there's always someone that they.
So Swoboda on the Patino team. So I can't pronounce it, but Swoboda or however you say his name.
Swoboda, I believe.
Yeah,
he was pretty good.
Mike, you talk about a player not being fast, not being quick. That's what I think. The 1964 recruits had Thad Jarris among several other more highly rated players, Red Talent, Cliff Berger, Clevenger, and some others. But Jarris was fast and he was quick.
Yes.
And that's why Jarris succeeded on the varsity where the others were just so-so.
Yeah. He was also more relaxed. He was not tight. He just went with it. It's like the game and the NCAA tournament. Dayton was the first team we played, and Dayton had this center named Henry Finkel.
Yep.
And he was about 7'1" and big broad shoulders, probably 285 pounds. And he was just killing us underneath the basket because we had, nobody. And Coach Rupp kept yelling, push him. And so halfway through the second half, there was a timeout, and I came over to the bench there, and Coach Rupp looked at Thad and he said, "Thad, goddammit, I said push him." Thad looked at him and he said, "Coach, I'm pushing, but he ain't moving."
That's good. That's good. Thad had a very quick first step. He was left-handed, so it gave him a little advantage right there. And then he was real quick for short burst. I don't think up and down the floor he was anything special, but he had a quick. I played high school with his brother, and unfortunately, his brother was a guard that liked to shoot. And I won't say any more, but I never saw the ball much. But anyway, well, I guess we probably allotted our time here. We thank you both. And by the way, we were going to have Larry Conley today, and unfortunately he had something that came up and couldn't join us, but we expect him the next, hopefully, couple weeks to be back. And that's why I think we sent out a tweet that he'd be joining us, but that obviously did not occur. So anything else, guys, before we hang up here?
No, hope we're successful in the recruiting season, whether it's getting guys back or getting guys transferred or whatever. We need at least 10 to run a scrimmage.
Right.
Well,
once it all, I don't know when the date is when it'll settle down, because I can't figure out.
Something like May
31st.
31st.
I looked it up. It's May 31st. They don't have to decide officially until May 31st.
Okay. And does that then also, some of them have said they're going to the NBA, but they kept the right to come back.
Same date. May 31st.
Same date. Okay. Well, okay. Then we can tell who's on first, so to speak. Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll basically know the rush. And also, we haven't spoke, but important loss yesterday was Livingston.
Yes.
It's not clear whether he has signed anything, meaning he could come back like we're talking about or not. But
he's able to come back. I checked it this morning.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. I'm looking, and I don't know why I thought about it, but I'm looking for one of our transfers or one of our guys that didn't play one year to come back and really, really improve. I thought that would be the case with 2 or 3 others, and I thought it'd be the same with, our guy from Texas whose dad passed away. I thought
Damian Collins.
Yeah, I thought Damian was going to have a big second year, and he didn't. And I'm waiting for somebody to be like Noah, Yannick Noah down in Florida, who was very average at best his freshman year, didn't play a whole lot. And then he comes back his second year and could have been a top 5 pick in the pros had he not elected to come back to try to win a second championship. But I think a lot of people said they've never seen more improvement out of a guy than Yannick Noah between his freshman and sophomore year. He was quite something, and then had obviously his second year was very good too. His junior year or junior year. Off subject, but you got to give it to those guys who could have gone pro after sophomore year made a ton of money, and they all elected to come back as a group. And the 04s, they call themselves, and came back, won another championship.
Yeah.
And they all came very rich, I think, in the NBA, even delaying it a year. So,
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, all right. We look forward to
Thank you.
hopefully you folks joining us next week, and we'll hang up for now. Take care.
Thanks all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Kentucky Basketball Then and Now. Mixed by sensational audio expert Daniel Dottridge of Atlanta Podcast Recording, with web hosting by Buzzsprout. On behalf of hosts Gary Waddell and Mike Harreld, go Big Blue.